Today I made a kimono for the very first time and I'm excited to share the outcome with you. While I was cutting out all of my pattern pieces from the fabric, I realized that I didn't have enough of the main fabric for my sleeve bands and the front bands, so I had to get a little bit creative. I ended up using some scraps left over from the dress I made in the last sew-along, and this happy accident led to a really cute coordinate set that I hadn't planned. And it's just one more great way that I can pair this kimono with items in my wardrobe. The pattern I used is Simplicity K9124, and I chose View C. I've left a link to the pattern below so that you can check out all the details, grab a copy, and sew it along with me. Let's get started. You will need 2 front pieces mirrored, 2 back pieces mirrored, 2 sleeves, 2 sleeve bands. I was running low on fabric, so my sleeve bands are half the width of the original pattern piece. 4 front bands and 2 cut from interfacing, and 2 back bands with 2 cut from interfacing. Place your back pieces right sides together and clip or pin the center back seam. Sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, press the seam open, and then serge both sides of the seam separately. I went ahead and serged all 4 of my shoulder seams separately. Now place your front pieces on top of your back piece and clip your shoulder seams. And sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And press your seams open. Place your sleeve piece with the armhole side seam of your garment. Match your notches and pin. Also note the notches on your bodice that indicate where to start and stop your stitching on the sleeve. So we're going to start and stop our stitching 5/8 of an inch away from both edges of the sleeve. So each end of the sleeve will have a 5/8 inch lip of fabric extending beyond the stitching, and this is where we're going to sew both sides of the sleeves together later. Sew between the outermost notches for both sleeves. I've gone ahead and serged the entire side seam of my garment, as well as the shoulder seam of my sleeve separately, and I serged both of the underarm seams of the sleeve separately. I've done this on both sides of the garment. Place your front and back pieces right sides together and clip your side seam and underarm seams. Now we're going to sew the side seam and the underarm seam in 2 stages. We're going to start our stitching at the notch that we stopped our sleeve sewing earlier and sew all the way down to the end of the hem. And then we're going to start again at this point and sew all the way to the end of the sleeve. So using the notch that we stopped sewing at earlier, sew both your side seam and your underarm seam separately. And do this on both sides of your garment. Now I've pressed the entire lower edge of my garment 5/8 of an inch to the inside. Now I'm ready to hem. I'm going to roll the outer raw edge of the garment to the inside to meet the crease, and then roll it once more and clip in place. Do this all around the entire bottom edge of your garment. Once you have your hem all clipped or pinned in place, sew all the way around close to the inner fold. Apply your interfacing to 1 pair of front bands and 1 back band. And pin your front facings to your back facings at the shoulder seams. Sew both sides with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press your seams open. Now place your facing right sides together with your garment, matching them at center backs and at your shoulder seams, and continue pinning all the way down the front seam. Your front band will extend 5/8 of an inch beyond the bottom hem and clip in place. Also note that at the back neck, it will feel like the back band is longer than the back neck area, so make little clips into that back band area within your seam allowance, maybe about 1/2 inch, and that will help you ease the material together so that the back band fits the back neck. Once you've pinned or clipped all the way around the front and neckline of your bodice, go ahead and sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Once that interfaced band is sewn on, go ahead and trim your seams and clip your curves. I'm just going to use pinking shears all the way around and cut the seam by about 1/2. Place your remaining front and back bands right sides together. Pin your shoulder seams. Sew at 5/8. Press your seams open and also press all around the outer notched edges of this band, 5/8 of an inch all the way around. And now match your bands right sides together, pinning at center back, matching your shoulder seams, and continue pinning all the way down both front bands. And now we're going to sew our bands together with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and when you get to the bottom of your bands, sew straight across to meet the stitching that you ended with at the bottom of your bodice band. And then clip your bottom corners, trim this new seam all the way around, and now we're going to understitch the seam that we just sewed to connect the two bands. To do this, open up both bands and press this seam in the direction of the fold that we pressed earlier. Sew all the way around your band on the side of your seam allowance, about 1/8 of an inch away from the original stitching. And do this all around the entire band as far as you can. Once you get to both of the center front corners, it will be difficult for your presser foot to get into that corner, so here is where you're going to be stitching just as far as you can. Now turn that band facing to the inside and poke out your center front corners and give this band a really good press all the way around. Now the instructions say to take your facing, place the folded edge over that stitching, and then slip stitch your facing to the garment with a needle and thread. But what I'm going to do is just pin it all the way in place all the way around, and then stitch in the ditch from the front of my garment right in the middle of this outer seam, catching my inner facing as I sew. So once you have the inner fold of your facing just covering that inner seam, and you've pinned all the way around, go ahead and slip stitch to secure, or stitch in the ditch all the way around. And now the very last steps are to prepare our sleeve bands and sew them to the garment. Fold your sleeve band in half to the wrong side and give that a good press. Then fold one of your long raw edges to the inside by 5/8 of an inch all the way across. And once you have those creases pressed, fold your band again matching the short ends and pin in place, and sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and do this for both bands. Place your sleeve band right sides together with the bottom of your sleeve, matching your seam and pin or clip in place. And then match the center of your band with the center notch on your sleeve. Continue pinning around the entire sleeve, and sew all the way around with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And the very last step is to place the folded raw edge just over the stitching that we just made, pin in place, and either slip stitch or stitch in the ditch, just as we did for the front and back bands. And once you do that, you're all done with your kimono. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out my other videos for more great sewing inspiration for your wardrobe. I'll see you in the next video.